The area we know today as the Pacific Northwest, specifically in and around the states of Washington and Oregon, by the 1840s had still largely been unsettled. You see, that territory wasn't specifically claimed by one particular country. Well, actually, it was. It was just held jointly. The United States and Great Britain both kind of held joint custody, if you will, or joint possession of the Pacific Northwest. And both would claim sovereignty, but neither truly had it. What the United States did have, though, was a significantly higher number of Americans there in the Pacific Northwest Oregon region than did Britain. So, this loose occupation that began in the late 18 teens or so would last for 20 some odd years. Um, the Americans, though, would eventually far outnumber the British there in Oregon, and they would start to lay a little bit more of an unofficial claim to it. And for obvious reasons, yeah, you can make a stronger case the United States should have possession of it because of proximity. England being all the way across the other side of the country and then across the Atlantic. So, what begins largely in the 1840s, and you can see based on the slide where you see Western territories, the Oregon country, a westward migration of American settlers in order to work the mines and the lumber territories and industries there in the Pacific Northwest, and therefore to also create new economic opportunities for themselves. They made Western migrations. We talked earlier that manifest destiny picture, American progress, where you have the angelic figure taking technology and white Christian values out west. You see stagecoaches and things like that. That's what I'm talking about. Those stagecoaches very likely could be on the Oregon Trail. What the Oregon Trail is, basically, you would have staging points in places like modern day Missouri, like around Independence, Missouri, near the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. And there would be various different wagon trails, specifically one in particular, where you could take a westward migration around and through via a pass, the Rocky Mountains, and make your way up to modern day Oregon or Northern California. Okay, that would be called the Oregon Trail. As a kid, I used to play a computer game called Oregon Trail. And it was basically it's a game that you could play that was reminiscent of the actual Oregon Trail, where you could have a small group of people make a wagon trip 2,000 miles across North America from Missouri to Oregon to settle new lands. Um, Typically, people who went to go work in mines or in the logging industry were typically single men. Those who aimed to be farmers were more likely to be families. So, this actual Oregon Trail event, the game I used to play, you could actually bring like 5 people, including yourself, and then you can go hunting for bison, deer, squirrels. You could feed yourself, stay at a fort. Invariably, when I was in high school, I would bring basically, I'd name all the other characters after girls that I had a crush on back then. So it'd be me and like 4 different girls that I crushed. And it'd be like, yeah, we're going to spend like 2 weeks at this fort taking a vacation. We're going to rest and get some rest and time off these girls that I like. Yeah. That's how I was when I was like 15 or 16. Okay, do what you got to do there, Hoss. Looking back on it, it's pretty humorous. And invariably, somebody in the game would get bitten by a rattlesnake, or they'd contract cholera, or they'd die from a fever, they'd catch typhus, or something like that. So your group of people might actually be different by the time you arrived out west. They might very well be different. Somebody dies of dysentery. Well, that sounds like an awful way to go. Okay. Um, the reality was, yeah, people very well may not have been wealthy. They may have been people of reasonable means. Obviously, you've got to have something to put together a stagecoach. Otherwise, if you're poor, maybe you band together. But generally speaking, these people would make a 2,000-mile trek that would last 6 months or so, and invariably, some of them would get sick and people would die along the way. Okay. Otherwise, though, this Oregon Trail was a real thing. People going out west to the Oregon Territory so as to unofficially settle it for the United States and therefore create new opportunities for themselves. So Oregon, yeah, I joke about the game I used to play and the girls I crushed. Otherwise, though, the journey had to be somewhat of a communal experience because you need to rely on yourselves. This trek would be weeks and weeks and weeks and months long, 6 to 8 months on average. You would hopefully avoid the harsh Rocky Mountain winters, so you had to time your travels in and around the winter season so as not to be caught in the possible blizzard type conditions out west in the mountainous regions. Okay. Also, as things happened, you had to share resources, you had to share various other different things. Perhaps because of the intensity of the journey, maybe you combined various different friend or family groups and you had one trek of a number of different people. And your plight affected everyone's plight and vice versa. Okay? So sometimes these settlers would encounter Native Americans, but very rarely did that ever turn violent. As a matter of fact, most Native Americans, despite their lands being trampled on and actually overcome, historically, they were actually very reasonable with most of these settlers on the Oregon Trail. Okay? Otherwise, though, sometimes they would serve as guides or maybe like they'd trade various different things, foods, any of the other things with the Oregon Trail travelers. Okay? The Oregon Trail helped establish the dynamic of manifest destiny. The idea that the United States will expand from coast all the way to the other coast. It was inevitable that we were going to do that. That was our destiny. Okay? And the Oregon Trail has a great nostalgic aspect in American history that helps accomplish just that. It's just that the territory they were going to wasn't specifically in the United States yet. It was duly claimed with Great Britain under partnership. Okay, so it wasn't firmly established at this point. But the Oregon Trail has a great place in American history, and the iconic, nostalgic images of settlers going out west, just like the ones you see in American Progress by John Galt, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, so these are the years of the 1840s or so. This is before the Civil War. This is during a time where you have the antebellum South and their cotton culture. The Cotton Kingdom is moving in. Texas was a fledgling republic at that time. In the prior video, I had just talked about how Texas had won its war for independence. Okay? This is what's going on, the Oregon Trail at the time. So, as I was mythologically making that 6-month trek with all the girls I crushed on the Oregon Trail, that would take, like I said, 6 to 8 months or so. Nowadays, you fly from St. Louis to Portland, Oregon, or Seattle, Washington. It's like a 2.5-hour flight. Watch a Adam Sandler movie and see you at the baggage claim. Imagine that. What takes like 2 or 3 hours used to take 6 to 8 months. That's how far we've advanced. Okay? Otherwise, though, the westward migration, the Oregon Trail, they're all in between.